Before the story begins, there is one important thing you should know. What you are about to hear has been passed down for years by people who lived near an old cemetery. For privacy reasons, the names of those involved have been changed. However, the timeline, the location, and the witnesses' accounts have been preserved as closely as possible. Whether you believe it or not is entirely up to you. But everyone who saw David Miller after that night agreed on one thing. He was never the same person again. The date was October 31st, 2016. The time was approximately 11:40 p.m. A full moon hung high above, yet thick fog covered the ground. The incident took place inside a historic cemetery on the outskirts of a quiet town. The cemetery, known locally as Old Blackwood Cemetery, had existed for more than 150 years. During daylight, it looked peaceful, but after midnight, almost no one dared to enter. For generations, local residents had shared the same warning. If you ever hear someone calling your name from inside the cemetery after midnight, never turn around, because the voice does not belong to the living. That Halloween night, 5 friends gathered together, telling ghost stories and laughing at one another's fears. Among them was David Miller, a 24-year-old known for accepting almost any challenge. His friends, Ryan, Chris, Ethan, and Jacob, all knew one thing about David. He hated backing down. As the conversation grew more intense, Ryan suddenly smiled and said, "If you're really brave, go into Old Blackwood Cemetery, alone, at midnight. Walk to the old oak tree, stand there for 10 minutes, and record the whole thing." The others laughed. David didn't hesitate. "Deal," he replied. "I'll bring back a video and prove there's nothing to be afraid of." His friends handed him a flashlight, a video camera, and a digital watch to track the time. They agreed to wait outside the cemetery gate while David entered alone. At exactly 11:58 p.m., David pushed open the old rusted iron gate. It let out a long, metallic creak before slowly closing behind him. From outside, his friends watched the beam of his flashlight grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the darkness. At first, David smiled at the camera. "See," he said confidently, "there's absolutely nothing here. It's all just another scary legend." But after walking for several minutes, the confidence in his voice began to fade. Something felt wrong. The cemetery had become unnaturally silent. There were no insects, no wind, no rustling leaves. Even the sound of his own footsteps seemed to disappear into the ground beneath him. At 12:06 a.m., David finally reached the enormous old oak tree. Around it stood rows of ancient graves. Many of the headstones had become so worn by time that their inscriptions were no longer readable. He placed the camera on a flat stone and continued recording himself. Without warning, His digital watch flickered once, then went completely blank. At the very same moment, the camera screen filled with strange black and white interference. David frowned. He assumed the batteries were dying. Then, from somewhere in the darkness to his right, a quiet voice whispered, "David." He instantly turned, shining his flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. Only rows of silent graves. He forced himself to relax. Maybe one of his friends had followed him inside, trying to scare him. He turned back toward the camera. Then, the same voice, this time directly behind him, whispered softly, "David, don't look back." David froze. His heart pounded so loudly, it felt as though the silence of the cemetery itself could hear it. He kept telling himself, it had to be one of his friends playing a prank. But that explanation quickly fell apart. The cemetery gate, where Ryan and the others were waiting, was nearly 300 meters away. There was no possible way anyone could have whispered directly into his ear from that distance. Slowly, he turned around. No one was there. But something had changed. On the old headstone beside him, where there had been nothing only moments before, now rested a single, withered black rose. He was certain it hadn't been there earlier. A chill ran through his entire body. Then, without anyone touching it, his camera suddenly powered back on. The recording was still running, but what appeared on the screen didn't match what stood before him. On the camera display, several pale human figures were silently standing behind him. Their faces looked unnaturally white, their eyes completely black. Every one of them was staring directly at David. Terrified, he spun around. Nothing. Only rows of ancient graves stretching into the darkness. He looked back at the camera. The figures had moved closer. One of them slowly raised a hand toward him. Then, the screen instantly went black. David couldn't stay there another second. He grabbed the camera and started running. But something was terribly wrong. The path he had taken into the cemetery was gone. The same graves, the same broken headstones, the same twisted oak tree kept appearing over and over again. It was as if he had become trapped inside an endless circle. Then the whispers began. At first, only one voice, then another, and another. Soon, dozens of voices surrounded him from every direction. Some whispered, "Come this way." Others said, "Stay with us." And somewhere among them, the same voice kept repeating his name. David. 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 The whispers grew louder, closer, until they seemed to surround his head. He covered both ears with his hands, but it made no difference. The voices were no longer outside. Now, they were inside his mind. At exactly 12:19 a.m., Ryan and the others heard a horrifying scream from deep inside the cemetery. Without thinking, they forced open the gate and ran toward the old oak tree. What they found would haunt them for the rest of their lives. David was kneeling beside an old grave. His face was completely pale. His eyes looked empty, as though he wasn't even aware they were there. With both hands, he was digging into the cold ground. Over and over again, he kept repeating the same sentence. They told me to open the door. They told me to open the door. His friends pulled him away by force and rushed him out of the cemetery. The following morning, the police searched the entire cemetery. They found nothing unusual. No footprints. No signs that anyone else had been there. But David's camera revealed something no one could explain. In the final 17 seconds of the recording, David was standing alone. Yet directly behind him, a tall, shadow-like figure slowly appeared, staring straight into the camera. The most disturbing part was what happened next. Every time investigators reached those final seconds, the video became corrupted. Digital forensic specialists examined the memory card several times. No one was ever able to recover the missing footage. Even today, people living near Old Blackwood Cemetery continue to repeat the same warning. If you ever hear someone calling your name from inside the cemetery after midnight, never answer, because not every voice belongs to the living.